Hello, welcome. We are going to continue with our Easter season adult study using the Gathering Remix curriculum. This came out after the National Youth Gathering last summer in New Orleans, and the theme there was created to be. Each day had a different word to fill in the blank at the end of that. It was created to be brave, created to be authentic, created to be free. I skipped over brave because that speaker wasn't the greatest. It was maybe two things worth quoting, and the rest was not bad, but not great. 17 minutes of Bible professor from Lutheran College. It was fine. I just don't think he should have been the opener, but we can share it another time if you want. So last week, what we did was we got into this second day theme of created to be authentic. And we got to hear from a pastor who is in charge of one of the pre-assembly events called the table. And it's lowercase t, capital A, BLE. So it is for disabled or differently abled folks, folks in wheelchairs, folks with different physical or other disabilities. And he spoke about what goes into planning the table event and then what goes into the full gathering to make sure that the participants from the table feel fully included, they have full access to everything, that it's not just, oh, and they're here too. Right. So that was kind of what we talked about last week. And we watched a video with this pastor, Jonathan Vihar. And he himself, as a youth, rode what was called the short bus, which, if you've heard jokes about the short bus, is usually seen as a statement. In his school district growing up, anybody who needed any kind of special need, special, what would it be called?
IEP.
IEP. I almost said IED, but that's an explosive, right? So IEPs,
IEPs can be explosive.
well, that's it. But any kind of thing, his school district growing up, you didn't go to the school you were zoned for. They took everybody who had any kind of special need and brought them to this other school. So he rode the short bus, smaller capacity for passengers, and immediately getting off the short bus, everybody knew, oh, you rode the short bus. So he grew up with that. Now, as an adult, he has two kids who have physical disabilities. And so he sees the world through a lens different than a lot of us would. And so that's where we came from. And he talked about, and we all talked about what it means to be authentic. Now, as I said last week, this curriculum is geared towards high schoolers. So last week we talked about, well, what does it mean to be your true self or to figure out who you are? Well, that doesn't only apply to high schoolers, right? We all go through different stages in our life, different things, experiences that kind of make us question that, who we are. We still are under the influence sometimes of peer pressure, whatever it is, we still are figuring out who we are our whole lives. And if you do have that strong sense of who you are, then you're still reflecting on it and reaffirming it. So these questions, even though they're written in a style for teenagers, still very much apply to us as adults as well. So we're going to pick up the second half of authentic. We're going to watch another speaker. For those at home, I'm not allowed to record the speaker, so I'll have to pause the recording. If you really want to see him, shoot me a message and we'll hook you up one-on-one. But we're going to hear one of the pastors who spoke at the gathering, so you'll get a chance to kind of see what the stage was like and what the arena was like down in New Orleans for us. And if there's time, we're going to move into the next one, which is created to be free, which has a couple of good speakers there too. Excuse me. So let's start with scripture. Go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 5.
Matthew what?
Chapter 5. Opening part of the Sermon on the Mount. These should be familiar verses to you. So Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16. So would you like to read that?
You were the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
Thank you, sir. So it's a reminder, right? Be yourself. If you look at Paul, we talked about Paul a month or two ago, and one of the things we talked about was how he was all things to all people. Um, but that's who he was, right? He was a speaker, he was a persuader, he could do all these things. But to each of those groups, he taught about the body of Christ. Many members in one body, right? Each person, each member of the body of Christ does their own thing in their own way. You don't look at the other one and say, well, man, I'm not as good because I'm not that, or I'm better because I'm not that. But all of them work together. Christ is the head. So I see these things going together. You know, let your light shine, you know, don't hide it, but also don't try to be some other light. And if we get to our second video, that's going to be part of that theme. Um, be you. So what we're going to hear today in this video is going to talk about being authentic, being you, and letting God's light shine through you. Don't hide it. You know, go start with this. So Jesus calls us to be the light of the world, shining brightly so that others can see the love of God in us. Our true selves are meant to be seen, not hidden. And think of teenagers who are trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in the world and what they're going to be when they grow up. I mean, how many things are they required to fill out and do about college, about careers when they have no idea yet, right? That's why it's good to have an apprenticeship or a 2-year school or a college or some experience that kind of bridges the gap between high school and the rest of your life where you get a chance to make some mistakes, figure some things out, get some exposure to stuff. There's another verse of scripture from Isaiah 60. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. Right? So you're reflecting and shining God's light through your own kind of prism. When we hide who we really are, we miss the opportunity to show others the light of Christ within us. Being authentic means letting that light shine without fear. This is not the same as, you know, a lot of times folks could hear this kind of stuff. You maybe hear this a lot of be you, right? Be yourself, kids. And some folks might roll their eyes at that, like, you know.
I just, that's what you live.
Sure. But that doesn't mean not growing. It doesn't mean never grow, never learn, never repent from the mistakes you make. But be you as much as you know who that is and grow from there. What it's saying is you don't have to be somebody else for God to love you or work through you. God can still work on you and in you and grow you, but there's going to be some dissonance and some interference if you're not just kind of being who you are. Living authentically allows others to see God's goodness through us. Our true selves can inspire others to seek and glorify God. Think of high school assemblies. Think of when they bring in the speaker to talk to you about staying on the straight and narrow, you know, don't do drugs, don't whatever. Usually it's somebody who got in a car accident because they were driving drunk and now they're going to tell their story, right? So they're being with themselves. They're being really open with all the mistakes they ever made and who they are and how they've grown. I think that's what it's saying. So be you, acknowledge the faults and the mistakes, but don't try to be somebody you're not, because then how's God going to shine through you if it's got to go through a couple, you know, twists and turns on the way out? So that's kind of the opening here. Let's have a prayer and then I'll introduce the first video. God, thank you for creating me to be authentic and for loving me just as I am. That's a hymn, right? Just as I am. Help me to have the courage to be real, to let my light shine, and to show others your love through my actions. Amen. Okay. Our speaker is named Pastor Emily Harkins. Okay, here's a little bit about her. I think she wrote this bio for herself. Passionate about faith, service, relationship building, learning, and love, Pastor Emily Harkins thrives on kindness, travel, advocacy and justice, hard work, community organizing, creative and effective communication, organizational systems, fun stationery, and Diet Coke. She adores her dogs and tolerates the cat. Actively trying to be her best self, all the while loving her neighbors, Emily serves as the lead pastor and founding developer of The Dwelling. Her congregation is called The Dwelling. It is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And this is how she describes The Dwelling. The Dwelling is a community of faith intentionality, but not exclusively. For beautiful humans who are currently or who have lived the experience of being unhoused and the often intersecting identities of addiction and recovery, severe and persistent mental illness, incarceration, reentry, hunger, generational poverty, generational trauma, and more. So not your typical Sunday congregation, right? So addiction, unhoused or homelessness, coming out of jail, poverty, that's her congregation. Throw in there a few retired and disillusioned accountants, a handful of skeptical young adults, some powerful single mothers, a group of wandering artists, a cowboy or two, and we've got ourselves a church. This is the experience she's speaking from. So we're going to talk about authenticity through one of her stories. For those at home, I'm sorry you don't get to watch this now. Like I said, come get me later if you want to see it. So we're going to, whoops. Oh no, where'd it go? There we are. We're going to pause the recording and watch the video, and then we'll come back. There we are. And we're back. So yeah, all 11 of us that went down to New Orleans got to hear that, experience that. It's something else to have 16,000 people, not an empty seat in the arena at the Smoothie King Center where the New Orleans Pelicans play. For those who didn't get to watch the video, that was Pastor Emily Harkins talking about her congregation, The Dwelling. She told a story about a member of their congregation who went by the mayor and how hard it was to get an ID for him. If you don't have an ID or something, it's hard to get an ID. But they finally got it, and he said, "I'm me again." And then a couple months later, he got caught up in the river and died, but they were able to identify him because of that ID. So he wasn't unnamed. And she went on to just say, I think in a nutshell, I would sum it up by saying, whatever else the world sees in you or throws at you, you are created by God. You're loved by God, just as you are. And that if we see others that way too, or at least if that's our starting point, inherent dignity, see other people as loved and created by God, then that's the kingdom of heaven. She said the kingdom of love. At least that's the starting place. So that was her talk on authenticity. I have a couple things to help reflect, but just first, general thoughts. What did you think of her message?
Good speaker.
Mhm.
And it was a good message. I think I related when I went to renew my driver's license, the guy at the next window was having a horrible time because he had nothing to prove.
Yeah.
And it was obvious he was not always from the United States. He had a very strong accent and, and he couldn't prove who he was and they couldn't give him a driver's license. And I mean, it's a catch-22. And you hear about airports now, you've got to have the right IDs to get on that plane and.
Yeah, at airports, you gotta have a star, which is an American
Which
passport.
do you have a star on your driver's license?
It's an American passport. To get that, you have to have a birth certificate. You have to have a bill of your address.
Yep.
And a couple other things, otherwise you can't get it. So
Yeah.
to prove that you are an American citizen.
And
So
they-
that's an American passport is what it is.
Yeah, and they started that process, what, a couple of years after 9/11?
Right.
It took them
people are
20 years to
And
get
they're
it.
complaining now because there's people trying to get on an airplane and they can't get
Yeah.
on because they don't have it. So I mean,
They put that on.
It's only been 20 years, but yeah.
it's only been
Well,
20
they
years. People
take
complaining
my
now.
driver's license out and look and see if I have the star.
Yeah. What, I mean, some of you have worked at MSF, some of you in your just life experiences have encountered folks who have had issues with addiction, homelessness, mental health. You know, what would it mean to somebody who's struggling in one of those areas? If the folks around them, if the starting place was, you are created and loved by God, right? And then we can talk about the other stuff. But if the first impression was, oh, you're loved.
Well, for the person who's hungry or doesn't have a home,
Mhm.
it might be, okay, but I need something besides love.
Oh, sure, sure, but how much? And how many of the looks that they see looking at them, is it sort of a judgmental look?
I would say, well,
Yeah,
but it's comforting that if you have an unknown dead in a war,
yeah,
they always say on the sign, known by God. So,
okay,
you know, the unknown is known by God, so.
Yeah.
Nobody else might know who you are, but he does.
yeah. Yeah, anytime we can take any of that heavenly promise and like bring even a fraction of it into this life, that's what, you know, all those parables Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like. You know, it could be the mustard seed, right? It's the bush that provides shelter. Starts small, but it gets so big, it provides shelter. Well, maybe that shelter is a house, maybe it's a meal, or maybe it's just, oh my gosh, you looked at me with dignity. Maybe that's the first one.
Sometimes all it takes is just an acknowledgement
Yeah,
that you see him.
yeah.
There's a program, a movie I watched, and the guy's sitting on a hot grill in New York City, where the heat comes up through it.
Oh, that kind of grill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sitting on one
Yeah.
of those.
Super picture.
Yeah.
No, sitting on one of those
Yeah,
grills.
Yeah.
And
Great's a better word.
great,
Yeah,
better word,
yeah,
yeah.
that's great.
And the guy walks past him and doesn't say anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And he says, what, don't you see me? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So you just acknowledge somebody is all it takes, even if you don't know who they are, just
Yeah.
say hi.
That's something. Pastor Emily says that we truly see that we truly see one another. When we truly see one another, we see Jesus. What do you think she meant by that?
Well, Jesus acknowledged everybody. I mean, he didn't judge. So if we try to live the life that he taught, it is because of him.
I didn't have an answer, but I like that. That's well said.
It's hard to answer, but if you think about the stories of the Bible,
Mhm.
he didn't turn away. I can't think of it that he turned away from. Maybe he did.
And he called some people hypocrites, but he didn't turn them away.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you have to agree with their way of life
Mhm.
or their attitude or something, but if you, at least, like you said, just hire, you know.
Yeah. But if you say hi, if you see somebody, that opens the door a crack, right? You might have to take more steps after that. And it's easier. I've done it. It's easier walking down the street or driving down the road. You see somebody with a sign or homeless, like just keep your eyes forward. Like, you know.
You pull up with the stop sign and they're right there by your car window.
Yeah.
And
Oh, wait, I need to do something with the video, right?
Yeah, they're like, you know, because, I mean, sometimes I hand $1 out the window, but sometimes but you do want to pretend like you didn't see them.
Which is ironic, because social services don't want you to do it.
I know,
Right?
I know.
What you have to do is look at their shoes. What type of footwear are they wearing?
I hadn't thought about that.
I do.
If they're wearing $200 Rockports, they're more than likely not homeless.
Well, I knew one individual who drove a Cadillac. Now, not everybody's this way, but he drove a Cadillac and it was always 4 blocks away. And he made more money doing that than he did working, because he didn't have any taxes to pay, he didn't pay any of that kind of, so he made a killing standing on the street corner
Yeah.
and then went home in his Cadillac.
And
One
that's
of the other
yeah.
things you have to look at is, could that be an undercover police officer trying to watch something?
Sure.
Watch a certain house
Sure.
or
Yeah.
certain business.
And you know, that's the thing. There's always going to be folks taking advantage of it. And I've shared that before, how hard it is when somebody comes and knocks on the door or calls and says, oh, I need gas or I need a hotel room. Because I've had more instances where it's clearly a scammer trying to take advantage, but it's hard. Right?
Well, I'm jaded, because when I was in college, I pulled that stunt.
Yeah.
Made money. So, you know,
You were the one.
But more than I think the majority are folks who really are.
Well, I think I told you, when we were here one day, I think it was for the luncheon, we had that gentleman come in off of the street.
Yeah.
And, when we told him we didn't have anything, but that he could stay at the hospital for 24 hours or 48, you know, he was, too interested in it, and he was in, I think he was in a wheelchair or anyway, it was hard for him to get around. And we offered, because Maryland called the police and they would come over, they would take him over
Sure.
there. He didn't want any part of that, so,
Yeah,
but you don't know for sure what his background was. you
Right.
know? Maybe he was wanted for something.
yeah, so it's tough. So imagine a congregation that is specifically geared towards all of the above here. Right, the folks who are genuinely homeless, hungry, addicts, mental health issues, the folks that are maybe trying to scam the system, but hey, come here, like, that's quite the congregation.
Lutherans used to have somebody just in Fredericksburg, which is not that far away, who worked with the street people and the homeless. Cause she spoke here one time, it was a woman, that's been several years ago,
There's still ministry going on there that a lot of churches work together on. I think it's
and
called Micah Street or something like that.
something like that,
Yeah.
and it's for the unhoused in
Yeah.
the street, okay,
Yeah.
so we still have that.
Yeah, and they started a congregation up there
Okay.
specifically, so they're starting like to build, get the land and build like a little tiny home place, like kind of like the ID. It's hard to get back on your feet if you don't have a place to stay.
Well, they held church services somewhere downtown in a building
Yeah.
somewhere.
It's hard to apply for a job if you don't have a mailing
Right.
address, right? So cart before the horse, catch-22s, all of that. The dwelling is a community that strives to see people not for what they are, but for who they are beyond any labels the world offers. Pastor Emily says this is our call to see and love ourselves and others for the whole of who God created them to be. Do you think it's easier to see and love ourselves or others? Which is easier, to see that starting point of love in somebody else or in yourself?
I think for somebody else.
Yeah.
I think we're just inherently a lot more judgmental to ourselves.
Yeah.
And we, most of us strive for perfection,
Mhm.
whatever that may be or whatever that may look like. And it's a lot easier to look at somebody else to accept their flaws and their imperfections more than it is to accept yourselves.
Yeah, you look in the mirror, you look at your house.
I think we're hardwired to that,
Oh, sure.
for survival.
Or even like you're at the playground and your kids are doing something and you're looking at somebody else and their kids are doing something and you're like, oh man, I've done that at least, like, do I measure up here or like?
Well, we are hardwired for that.
Yeah,
It's a survival instinct, to be with people of our own flavor, is a good way to put it, I guess.
Sure. Or ilk.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she was saying. And I think that's why, to me, her presentation really goes towards, your teenagers, because we are taught, how to be so critical of other people, and you're looking at other people and what do they look like? What are they wearing? What are they doing? What's in, what's out? And how do we measure up to that? Well, this person may be fatter than me, but, or this person's skinnier than me, or, they're in this kind of clothing, and,
Yeah.
And I think, what her message is, you don't know what's going on with that person necessarily.
And how countercultural in the midst of that constant comparison or ranking to say, actually, we're going to start with love. We're going to start with you are loved exactly where you're at, and then go from there, as opposed to how do you measure up? Yeah.
I think it's more so now than when I've been out of school almost 60 years, but that kind of dates me. But I don't remember that being the case when I was a kid. Maybe it's because of the Midwest, I don't know, but I didn't have that issue.
It's for you too.
I'm starting to see it kind of not be quite as much with my kids growing up as it was when I was their age. There was a lot of, there's a lot of awareness now of what they call, was it body shaming,
Oh,
that's the term.
Yeah.
So when, I was growing up, it was like, well, she's tall, she's short, she's fat, she's skinny, there was a lot of that going on, and now, I can see our culture going more toward, you don't talk about people's bodies, you don't look, they're trying.
If you think it, you don't have to say it. Right?
Yeah, and they're
Yeah.
trying to get more toward, you need to be healthy,
Yeah.
not necessarily need to be a certain size.
Yeah.
Like the models that we grew up with.
Okay.
So I see a lot of that.
That's one thing,
changing.
I grew up, Twiggy was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right.
So now you have more
And you're seeing
healthy
more,
looking ladies.
yes, the
New way to
voluptuous
put it, I
ones,
get it.
it's the voluptuous. It's
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
teachers used to
yeah.
say.
Which
Well,
you didn't see when I was a kid,
Yeah.
that's true.
And the other piece was, so I'll tell a story too. When I was in middle school, I was oblivious, right? I know I wasn't popular. I wasn't at the top of the social totem pole,
Me either.
but I was also in my own little bubble, right? I was just an oblivious kid. Um, at the end of middle school, my best friend, and we would, you know, we did all sorts of stuff together. He was gonna go to a private high school. His dad taught at a tech school just up the street, and he was gonna drive with his dad all the way over there, which was a good half an hour, and go to that high school instead of staying in the public schools and moving up in our district where we were gonna be. And I was like, why? Why are you switching? Like, I'm gonna miss you kind of thing. And he said, well, it's just been so awful here. Like, what are you talking about? It's like, people pick on me all the time. Like, they do. He's like, yeah, like he couldn't believe that I hadn't noticed it. So that maybe you were an oblivious kid, maybe you were just high enough on the totem pole that who knows, like, but it's also possible that stuff is happening and I know from personal experience, I just wasn't aware of it.
Well, I can say that to me, when I was in grade school, I was the oldest in my class and the smallest. So I told you that story about my epiphany when I got, a bunch of guys were gonna beat the daylights out of me, and I had the first punch and they all disappeared. But in high school, I worked too much, so I wasn't social. I didn't go to soccer
there you
house,
go.
I wasn't a social individual, so I went to school, I did my thing, I was like you, was in my own little
Sure,
world.
and so the other kids are gonna pick up on that and be like, it's not even worth it.
Yeah, so I was not, I was a non-entity, basically.
Well, when I was in high school, there were 7 of us girls, and then of course we found 7 boys. We had all these parties together, and how exclusive, I don't think we realized we were.
Yeah.
And when we had our 50th class reunion, some of these people that we had ignored had turned out really successful and so forth. And I think a lot of us stopped and think back of how mean
Sure.
we were. At that time, we didn't know we were being mean, or
Yeah.
was it in Powhatan where a young man committed suicide in the last week or so from bullying? It's been, well, his parents said he'd been bullied a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that can affect teenagers a
Definitely.
great deal, whether you're on the in crowd or even if your in crowd is a small group,
Yeah.
you want to be a part of some group.
And so we teach our youth now when we have speakers like this and we do, Bible studies and things. We teach folks to get beyond their clique and see other people and be a Christian, be a neighbor to other folks. Doesn't mean you have to be best buddies, but you don't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then you also have grace for yourself, because if you're a teenager, you get caught up in all of it. Maybe you're not bullying somebody mercilessly, but maybe you're not also going out of your way to include them. So part of this is trying to teach accepting yourself, accepting others, but part of it is also the grace for when you mess up.
Well,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, bullying somebody or down looking, it took an effort and it took challenge, because now you can just do it on Skype or do it on Twitter, whatever. It's easy to do it when you're not confronted. You did it at my age, you got your nose broke,
Yeah.
So you have to pay a price for that a lot of times,
And I think
which
it's
they don't anymore.
it's swung around. It's not just anonymous. I think the culture of being able to criticize and comment on things anonymously or with the feeling that there's no consequences emboldens people to then do it in person too. So it's not only online, it's now, I think, rebounded to, I can say what I want when I want.
We talk about that with his, my stepsons all the time, because they're right around my age. And,
How old are you?
Turns 40 in September.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Christopher's what, 37?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we talk about that all the time where, it used to be, you had it out on the playground and then you were done.
Yeah.
And now you can't, you can't get away.
You walked away and somebody won, some guy lost, and one of the guys that beat my butt the most because I had a mouth that would write checks at my butt couldn't cash.
What?
And we turned out to be best buddies.
Yeah.
But the point being is that you did it and it was over with. Nowadays, you get the fist fight, they're gonna come back after a while, blow you away.
You can't get
so-
away from it.
Oh, yeah, you get that.
you know, you have the social media and you can't get away
No.
from it.
You get the
And then
label stuck on
everybody
you.
knows about it. It's not just
Yeah,
the 3 or
right,
4 of you that were fighting. Everybody knows about it.
One of the speakers, is it one we're gonna watch? I think we might get to it next time, talks about switching schools, like it got so bad, they switched schools. And even then, somebody looks you up. Cause you can do that now.
Yeah, once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
Did you see where at the congregation where all the cardinals gathered, they made them all give up their cell phones?
Yeah,
When they-
yeah, you can't look anything up.
So even the high priest had to give up their cell phones.
When we moved here from Roanoke, it was really hard on both of our kids,
Yeah.
as they were, gosh, Nathan was halfway through his junior year.
Oh, gosh.
Senior year,
No,
yeah,
okay, anyway.
because he tells me all the time, that he spent the last
Either way,
semester.
mid high school.
That's not my point. That's not my
No.
point. Glenda was in middle school, and that was a hard age for
Yeah.
her, and actually, this church didn't have much of a youth group at that time.
Yeah.
And she was drawn in by Mechanicsville Christian Center.
Mhm.
And she was accepted there, and I'm really glad that she was.
Yeah.
And, I just think that's so important. I'm so glad that we got going here.
Yeah, we made sure our kids stuck with band when they got here, even though the teacher loved them to death, but it was a pandemic, it was all online. He had stuff going on in his life. It was a definite change from what they've been used to. Like, no, stick with band, because we know that there's like this group there, you know, find that group, find that acceptance. Let's do one more and then maybe we can get one more video in. Pastor Emily says when she looks at the dwelling, when she looks at you, she sees the church. So, okay, same thing applies to the church, right? We still have social cliques and other things in the church. Sometimes intentional, sometimes not. Sometimes I think this congregation is really good at welcoming new people. But there are times, even the best of us can, you know, neglect or unintentionally exclude or intentionally exclude.
Wherever we sit, we all go in and sit in exactly the same places every
Yeah.
Sunday.
You know, creatures of habit, so,
Matter of necessity.
well, sometimes.
I don't know, that back pew where you sit gets awfully crowded some Sundays.
I would sit in the back with you if it wasn't for Ian. He has to sit in the front.
Yeah. I'm
Good
glad,
for him.
I like it, I like it.
I like the back.
Well, that's good booster.
But so, there you go. But yeah, when if we saw the church that way as everybody, you know, you use the dwelling as the extreme example, but everybody's welcome. We say that all the time. We got the new banner, all are welcome in God's house. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to enact it. But says, you know, the church is from the dwelling, the church is for the wanderers, the seekers, the questioners, the doubters, the ones that feel worthy, and more importantly, the ones that do not. This is the place where God and God's people connect, come and dwell. That's from their website. All right, moving on to day 3. At the gathering, it was created to be free. So created to be brave, bold enough to like step out there in faith, created to be authentic, do that as yourself and grow from there, and created to be free. So think of all the things we've already talked about with teenagers and the pressures they have and the comparisons and everything. Well, maybe what would it feel like to kind of shed all of that and just be free? Can you close the door, Roger? Because if I start another one, they're just letting out. I think we can do this. So this session focuses on being free from all that binds us and bars us from God's promise of life. Genesis 25. I'll just give you the recap. I'll just read it. If you want to follow along, you can, but Genesis 25, verse 19. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Isaac is the one that gets skipped over, right? We get a lot with Abraham and a lot with Jacob and Esau. Isaac kind of gets skipped over. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, if it is to be this way, why do I live? So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. And no ultrasounds in ancient Judah. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. It means, I think, does it mean red or hairy? I think it means hairy. Or red? I think it's red. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heels. He was named Jacob. Jacob means heel grabber. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. Jacob was a quiet man, living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field. You guys know the rest of this, right? Jacob disguises himself with Rebekah's help, tricks Isaac into giving Jacob the blessing instead of Esau. Okay. They couldn't be more different, these two. Different skills, different personalities, different appearance, made Jacob feel like he had to be like Esau to receive the same love and blessings from his father. And then this was a patriarchal society, so that was a big deal. And so we're going to hear from a pastor named Drew Tucker, who will share his own experience of feeling like he had to be somebody else, his brother, in order to be loved and valued. Tried to change who he was, but it only left him feeling empty and dissatisfied. Wasn't until Drew embraced who he really was that he found freedom. He realized that God created him to be free from the burden of being someone else. Just like Jacob, Drew discovered that God's love for him wasn't based on being someone else, but on being fully himself. So while we're listening to this, think for yourselves, have you ever felt the pressure to be somebody you're not in order to fit in? Okay. How does it feel to know that God created you to be free from a burden like that? So we talk all the time about how we're freed from sin, freed from death, but free from the burden of trying to be somebody you're not. It's a powerful message, especially for teenagers, but I think it still carries weight for us. So let's do that. We'll watch the video. We might have to cut off right after the video, but then we'll pick up talking about it next time. So folks at home, we're just going to stop here. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.